All right, here we go. Brand new Flyers Daily for the 26th of March, 2024. Flyers Daily, as always, presented by Ticketmaster. Make more memories live. Flyers back in action tonight. They're going to take on the New York Rangers, the final game of the 7-game gauntlet, which started back on the 14th of March, so a little less than 2 weeks ago. Toronto, Boston, Toronto, Carolina, Boston, Florida, and the New York Rangers coming up tonight. Right now, a record of 2-3-1, so that's 5 total points in the previous 6 games, and to look for 2 coming up tonight. And I can't remember a season where the Flyers have, when they've played a team, they've been the top points percentage team in the NHL at that time. The Rangers are that. They are tied going into the game tonight with the Vancouver Canucks at a .690 points percentage. We've seen the Panthers not once but twice as the team with the top points percentage in the NHL. That was the 2 games in Florida back on February 6th and March 7th. Both Flyer wins. They were actually the third-ranked team in the NHL when the Flyers just lost to them on Sunday. We saw earlier this season the Boston Bruins. The Flyers faced them when they were the number 1 ranked team in the NHL. The Winnipeg Jets, not once but twice, the Flyers beat them when they were ranked the number 1 team in the NHL. And if you go all the way back early in the season to when the Flyers took on the Vancouver Canucks, won that game, Vancouver at the time, very early in the season, Flyers beat them 2-0. And that was the first time that they beat a team with the top points percentage. And then they beat them again. So they've done very well against the team when they play them that is the top when that team is the top team in the NHL. So that absolutely is something that has been a good element of this season. And here we are. I mean, we're sitting here on March 26th with 10 games to go. They've played 72 games. And while they are in a playoff spot, they've basically been in a playoff spot for the entirety of the season. They got off to a good start, put themselves in playoff position. They've maintained it. Yeah, they've gotten some help. If we're being fully honest here, let's be fully honest. They've gotten some help with the Chase group faltering at times, but that's why an NHL season is 82 games. And their margin right now, at this point in the season with 10 to go and 12 to go for the Washington Capitals, is not a great margin. Flyers are 2 points up on the Caps. Flyers have played 72 games with 81 points. The Caps have played 70 games and have 79 points, so 2 games in hand. Isles now 1 game in hand and are back 6 points. So really now the threat, we thought the threat was the Islanders. Now the threat is the Capitals, who just kind of keep coming. And when you look at the NHL strength of remaining schedule, now this is an advantage for the Flyers, provided that they don't slip on teams that are what you would deem as inferior. The Flyers right now have the 27th of 32 teams hardest schedule remaining with a points percentage of .513. The only team, they have the Rangers twice, including tonight. That's really the only team. You look at the other games. They have the Blackhawks. The Blackhawks stink. Columbus. They have Montreal twice. They have Buffalo. They have the Devils. And they have the Islanders. And they also have the Caps to round out the season. The last game of the season coming up on April 15th or 16th, excuse me. So of their tough opponents, they only have 1 listed. The Caps, the team that they're battling with down the stretch here for that 3rd spot in the division, has the 10th hardest schedule in the league with 12 games remaining, 1 against Carolina, 2 Boston, 1 Toronto, 1 Tampa. They have Ottawa once, Pittsburgh once, Buffalo twice, Detroit twice, which is important. And, of course, they have the Flyers on April 16th. So we're going down the stretch. This has been a year of incredible storylines. I remember way back in December, and I went back and looked at my email. I found the email that I wrote to myself on December 28th, 2023 at 10:30 p.m. And in the subject line, it says top 5 storylines thus far in the 2023-24 season. The number one thing I had was that Torrey Krug said no, Provorov is out, Hayes is out, and Sanheim remains. The number 2 biggest storyline was that Michkov fell to the Flyers after an under-the-radar visit to Voorhees, plus they got Bonk at 22. So they get Michkov and Bonk in the first round. The third biggest storyline I had was the dismissal of Chuck Fletcher, now just over a year ago, the ascension of Danny Briere and Keith Jones, and the transfer of power from Dave Scott to Dan Hilferty. The fourth one I had, again, this is back on December 28th, was the return of Sean Couturier and the Couturier we grew accustomed to over many years as a Flyers center. And then the last one was a bit tongue-in-cheek, but the center ice logo was no longer cut in half. It was the revitalization of the franchise's identity and their operating standard. So I look back on that and I go, okay, obviously a lot of those things still stand, although Couturier's minutes are way down and he was not healthy scratched once but twice. That's a huge storyline when a coach healthy scratches the captain. They named him the captain. That's a storyline. And then 34 days later, he was healthy scratched twice. Obviously, a huge storyline is the Carter Hart era being over. It's a huge element of this season. Tippett gets an 8-year contract extension. They've scored 15 shorthanded goals. Bradshaw and the work he's done on the PK. They've played 14 different D-men. I could do an episode on each one of these things that I'm listing out, and maybe I will in the offseason. John Tortorella gets a 2-game sus and a $50,000 fine for refusing to leave the bench. That's a storyline. Sean Walker comes in. Whoa, who's this guy? He's not a throw-in. He's a good player. Gets traded. Brings you another first-round pick in the 2025 draft. Cutter Gauthier never starts his career as a Philadelphia Flyer. He gets sent to the Ducks, and they bring in a top 6 overall pick in Jamie Drysdale as a right-side defender. Unfortunately, Drysdale not playing right now because he's dealing with an injury. Hopefully he gets back. Huge storyline. Cam York, maybe one of the most positive storylines of this entire season. Cam York will be better than a lot of us thought, and not just better by a little bit, better by a lot of bit. I think he's going to be an absolute stud. I think he's got confidence. He's got everything is there in his game. I didn't know if he had the compete and that fire because he's so cool and chill and confident. He does. The polarization of Morgan Frost. We've talked about it a couple times through this season. The way he's playing, this has the potential to have its own Old Takes Exposed Twitter handle populated with tons of material from a lot of people that listen to this podcast and others. Then you look at this one, and this is a really big storyline. Maybe the biggest storyline of the season as I sit here on the 26th of March, 2024, with 10 games to go, is that winning can happen while you're rebuilding. Now, some people are going, no, it can't. That's not how you rebuild. You got to pick at the top of the draft. No, winning can happen when you're rebuilding. A rebuild is the accumulation of assets for future, consideration to get better. They had 2 first-round picks last year. They get Michkov, they get Bonk. Both have had draft plus 1 tremendous seasons. Tremendous. Better than you could have even hoped for. You've got 2 picks in this year's first round, and you've got 2 picks in next year's first round. You've got a plethora of second-round picks, and you've got a lot of organizational assets to make some things happen. So winning can happen while rebuilding. Culture can be rebuilt when rebuilding. You can start that process in a rebuild and bring that element of the culture back before you're ready to compete for a Stanley Cup. This team might make the playoffs. They've got 10 games left. They got some work to do. And yeah, their opponents after tonight aren't great. There's some tough ones in there, but when you look at the Islanders, maybe the Devils give you a little bit of an issue. You do have Buffalo's a bit on the come lately. You do have the Rangers twice, including tonight, and obviously Washington. But you can win and you can rebuild that culture. That's been the biggest storyline of this season, is how far this team went from the end of last season or the end of 2 seasons ago, before John Tortorella even got here, to where they are now. We could get some monster storylines coming up in the offseason. Who knows what can happen? Would it shock me if this front office went out and made a blockbuster Bafo move? No. I think this NHL offseason is going to be insane. And here's why. Because the cap is now going up. And it's going to go up every year for the very, very predictable amount for the next bunch of years, just on an ascension. Teams are going to be moving players. Teams are going to be moving high-profile players, high-profile picks. When you look at a team like Vegas, they of all the years they've been in the league now, I think it's 6 or 7, they've won of their first-round picks. Other than that, they've used that pick to either draft a player and then trade them or whatever. They've built their team not through the draft. That team has not been built there. That team has been built by going out and making deals, and they did it in a flat cap world the last couple of years. This NHL offseason is going to be bonkers. So crazy, crazy storylines throughout this entire season, and it's not over yet. Maybe the craziest storyline will be the fact that this team is going to go to the first round of the playoffs, maybe play Carolina or the New York Rangers. That may be the craziest storyline because none of us, myself included, saw that coming. So there's a lot in this craziness of this year. Some obviously some storylines that have been wow factor, good and bad. When you talk about, the Carter Hart era being over, that's a are you kidding me? That's a huge storyline. And now as we sit here with 10 games to go, you've got Sam Ersson, but Felix Sandstrom hasn't been able to put a game out there for you. When you look at the remaining 10 games, how many of them should Ersson play? Some say all 10. I don't know about that. You're going to get the guy hurt. I know there's this notion of, goalies used to do that all the time back in the day. It's like a pitch count in baseball. Well, are they soft now? The game's different now, too. And the body reacts to the game a lot differently now than it did then. Yeah, the equipment's better, but the game is faster. It's requiring so much more of your body and your mind and your muscles and your ligaments and your bones, all of that, and your recovery. So it's not as simple as just saying play them the rest of the way. We'll see if Alexei Kolosov, comes over and gets his visa. Hopefully that gets resolved real soon. He gets over here, maybe has a couple of games with the Phantoms. You go, okay, let's try him out. Let's see what he's got. Let's throw him into the pressure cooker. I'm not against it. But I don't want to see goaltending undo this team and prevent them from getting into the playoffs. I still think this team has so much to benefit by getting into the playoffs. And I drafted this email now in response to my other email. And I'm going to send it to myself right now. So at 6:50 p.m. on the 25th of March, when I'm recording this, those storylines are the storylines that stick out to me most. We'll see what those storylines are when it's all said and done. And we'll see what those storylines are when we get to the NHL draft and free agency. And when we're counting down to camp next year and talking about the biggest question marks going into a season. There's still a lot to be determined in this final 10 games. I'm already starting to get the offseason anxiety that I get. There's only 2 seasons in my book. There's hockey season and there's hockey offseason. There's not spring, summer, fall, winter. I love hockey season. Hockey offseason, I'm good with for the first 2, maybe 3 weeks. And then I want the season to return. I love the grind of the 82. I love the storylines of a season. I love the chapters, the twists, the turns, the things you saw coming, the things you didn't see coming, the growth of players, the disappointment of others, players that can't manage to stay healthy, and you go, what would have been? All of those things. I love it. And I get the anxiety of the offseason even before it comes. It's something that I got to work out, trying to just stay in the moment and enjoy it. But there's 10 games left. all to play for. Flyers are in freaking stinking New York tonight to take on the Rangers. And the Flyers are fighting for a playoff spot. Last of this 7-game gauntlet. I will tell you, though, too, I'm a little nervous about Montreal and Chicago at the end of the week. Not going to lie. When you come out of a 7-game gauntlet like this, got to find a way to guard against a letdown because the opponent's not of the same caliber. But we'll get there when we get there. It's Flyers-Rangers tonight. What's going to happen in New York tonight? We shall see. We'll break it down tomorrow. If you have any thoughts on any of the storylines, you can always shoot me an email, jason.myrtetus@gmail.com. You can always DM me on Twitter @JasonMyrt, or you can also comment below if you're watching on the YouTube channel. I say enjoy the hockey tonight. I think tonight's going to be a lot of fun. I am pumped up. Flyers, Rangers at the Garden, all to play for, 10 games to go. The weather's getting nice. Damn, it's going to be fun. All right, I better calm down. So let's get after it. I will talk to you tomorrow. We'll recap Flyers, Rangers, and much more on a brand new episode of Flyers Daily.